But first, here's my take. Today, it's in the form of a letter. Dear Senator Schumer, when you announced your decision to vote against the nuclear agreement with Iran, you explained your reasons in a nearly 1,700-word statement that is thoughtful in substance and civil in tone. And yet, in the end, I found it unpersuasive. I believe that the agreement is flawed, but it is the most intrusive, demanding, and comprehensive set of inspections, verification protocols, and snapback measures ever negotiated. You set out 3 sets of objections, which I will get to, but you failed to take note of what must happen at the outset before Iran gets any widespread sanctions relief. Iran must destroy 98% of its enriched uranium, all of its 5 to 20% enriched uranium, remove and store 2/3 of its centrifuges, including all advanced centrifuges, terminate all enrichment at its Fordo nuclear facility, and render inoperable the key components of its Iraq plutonium reactor. All these steps must be completed to the satisfaction of the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's difficult to imagine that a serious military campaign against Iran would set back its nuclear program as much as this deal does at its outset. Your first objections are about the inspections and sanctions. You argue that the inspections are not anytime, anywhere, and have a 24-day delay that is troubling. But all of Iran's known nuclear facilities would be subject to anytime, anywhere monitoring. As for new suspicious sites, as the nuclear expert Jeffrey Lewis points out, what opponents of the deal have done is add up all the time limits and claim that the inspections will occur only after a 24-day pause. This is simply not true. Should the U.S. intelligence community catch the Iranians red-handed, it might be that the Iranians would drag things out as long as possible, but in such a case, the game would be over. In that scenario, Senator Schumer, you argue that the sanctions snapback provisions are cumbersome. We must have read different documents. The one I'm looking at contains the first mechanism for the automatic reimposition of sanctions ever created, and they can be triggered unilaterally by Washington. You argue that the United States might prefer to restore sanctions in part and that other countries may not go along with this. But the fact that Washington could unilaterally snap back all sanctions is surely extraordinary leverage that it could use to get other countries to agree to a partial reimposition of multilateral sanctions. Your second objection is that after 15 years of relief from sanctions, Iran would be stronger financially and better able to advance a robust nuclear program. Let's be clear. Iran is going to get sanctions relief no matter what. The international sanctions against Iran were put in place by other countries solely to get a nuclear deal. None would go along with extending the sanctions, given that Iran has produced what they all regard as an acceptable agreement. They have said as much. Your final objection is that Iran would use some of the newly freed up resources to redouble its efforts to create even more trouble in the Middle East. That might be true, but the deal does not stop the United States and its allies from countering these activities as they do today. Your basic conclusion is that if one thinks Iran will moderate, one should approve the agreement. But if one feels that Iranian leaders will not moderate, then one should conclude that it would be better not to approve this agreement. This is the most puzzling and frankly illogical part of your case. If Iran remains a rogue state, all the more reason to put its nuclear program on a leash. Rejecting this deal would result in an Iran that ramps up its nuclear program without inspections or constraints, with sanctions unraveling, and an America that is humiliated and isolated in the world. And so, I respectfully urge you to reconsider your position. For more, go to cnn.com/Fareed and read my Washington Post column.